All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's tournament strategy show where we will look back at last night's slate, see what went well, and then we'll game plan today's slate. And then, as long as I don't get sick again, we will have a pre lock show today where we will talk through leverage plays, core plays, and the execution side of things. But let's jump right into it. Let's look at last night's slate. What's up, Shooter Jenkins? Good morning to you as well, man. And yeah, last night was a good night for me. So I'm happy about that. It was a great sports betting night as well. Shout out to the Sharp app, link in the description if you're interested in just pure bets, because those guys have been crushing it. But this was last night's winning lineup. I think the winning contest was like, what, 20, 50K? So congrats to Falcons Club for that. Start off at the top. TJ McConnell made the nuts line. This was the highest total game yesterday or close to it. And so it doesn't shock me that TJ found his way in there. We've seen this happen a few times this season. The play made sense. Just wasn't someone I was overly excited about. And I didn't force exposure to TJ, but he did sneak into a couple of lines. Cade Cunningham, we talked about on this show that if he played, he was questionable. And so this was really a big focal point. But if he played, you needed to have exposure to Cade Cunningham. Soft matchup for both of these teams, and that's why we see a few players from both sides. But at 8,300, Cade was definitely viable once we got the news he was going to play. He wasn't a sneaky play by any means either, though, but he made a crap ton of sense. Next up, we have Jason Tatum, who made the nuts line. Brown out, you play Tatum. We talked about this as well on the show yesterday. I don't think this was a shock. The more disappointing thing was just that some of the other Celtics players didn't really have extremely strong performances, but Tatum was able to get there. Jabari Walker was someone that we also talked about on this show. Sim Model absolutely loved Walker. I still don't fully understand it because the matchup was pretty tough, but the price tag was great and he looked solid while he was out there. Jaren Jackson Jr., we also talked about on this show yesterday. He was a pre-lock show mention for me on this show. Brandon, aka B-Dubs, wrote him up as an official leverage play for him. And so we're all over this low-owned Jaren Jackson Jr. play against a really bad Detroit team. That worked out. Benton, I was around field weight exposure on, matched the field. That went well. Grant Williams was a lock for me. Wrote that up on the cheat sheet. And then Watford, we had plenty of. I didn't make Watford a core play, I don't believe, but I was right around field weight exposure. He showed up a lot naturally, and he was one of the ways you can just afford Tatum. So, yeah, in general, good night. You said the Pelicans really hurt you? Yeah, they were a little underwhelming last night, but in general, you got to take some of those winning slates when you can. So I'll take it. Back to business. We'll look at today's slate. We have the Lakers going up against the Raptors, which, if you've been playing DFS this season, or at least over the last few months, hearing the Raptors on a slate automatically means we start to lick our chops a little bit. We're getting more excited. We're playing the Lakers tonight. The slightly more unfortunate piece is that they have their usual guys listed as questionable, LeBron James and Anthony Davis. We never really know what to expect here. If they play, we're playing them. If they don't play, we're playing more Lakers. They are on the front end of a back-to-back, which means the likelihood of one of these guys missing this game against the Raptors that they should be able to win relatively easily wouldn't surprise me if they sit, but it also wouldn't shock me if they both play and then maybe one or both sit tomorrow because they're going up against another bad team in Washington. Long story short, thankfully, this is one of the first games on the slate, and I'm playing AD and LeBron if they play. If they don't, we'll consider some of the other pieces here. But for now, it's really just AD who's standing out for me. Any other injury news worth mentioning there? Yeah, no, nothing, nothing really. Just the studs, and then we'll look at the rest later. The Raptors are interesting, but not really from a DFS perspective. It's just that they have RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly listed as probable. These two guys have been out for a good hot minute. So them returning hurts every other player from a DFS standpoint. We've been playing guys like Grady Dick, Jordan Nwora, Bruce Brown. These guys become much less viable plays with Quickly and Barrett returning. Quickly and Barrett were in fantastic form before their injuries. The matchup against the Lakers isn't anything I'm afraid of, but I kind of want to take a wait and see approach, at least as of right now, before I'm taking shots on them. RJ Barrett at 7,700 isn't a bad price tag, but let's see. He's been out for so long. We have to expect some sort of minute restriction here. They're not really competing for too much these days. So I'm not expecting too much. I could be wrong. We'll wait and see if we hear anything from the coaches. But as of right now, I'm not too excited about the Raptors. It's really just the Lakers I'm looking at. This is the highest total game on the slate, though, which my philosophy is always to force exposure to the studs here. I'll see where ownership falls. I'm not expecting Quickly or Barrett to be too chalky on this slate. If they're going to be around 2 to 3% owned, I'm willing to take a 5-10% shot on Quickly and Barrett, just depending on ownership. Man, if they weren't playing tonight, the Raptors could actually be interesting, but tough team to look at right now. All right, moving on. We have the Bucks going up against the Washington Wizards tonight. For the Bucks, they're relatively healthy. Giannis is probable. Chris Middleton is probable. Patrick Beverley is probable. Beauchamp is probable. Damian Lillard is out, which still matters a decent bit here. He missed the game on Saturday, and we saw Patrick Beverley start in his place. And even though Patrick Beverley's battling that wrist injury that almost had him out for the season, but he decided to play through. He looked pretty good. He looked pretty freaking good. He played 30 plus minutes, made a couple threes, was involved offensively, distributed the ball very well, decent defense. I mean, Pat Bev is very much so in play. Of course, we have to make sure he starts again, but I can't think of a reason for why he wouldn't at this point. Patrick Beverley is someone that will be probably one of the more chalkier guys on this slate, but I'm comfortable eating the chalk. And then Giannis, he's on the thumbnail. I can't think of anyone who can stop him on Washington. His usage increase with Leonard out just makes me more interested in Giannis. And thankfully, Middleton is still here as well. Middleton at 7,100 in the super soft matchup against the Wizards. Hard for me to get too excited about Middleton yet because, as you can see, we haven't updated ownership quite yet. Ownership is going to dictate a lot for me around how excited or unexcited I am around Middleton. If he's already seeing like 20+% ownership, then I'm comfortable being around field weight. But I like Middleton a lot more if he's probably around 5 to 10% ownership, because then I can get to that 20-30% number and I have a little bit of leverage over the field because of his already low ownership. But we'll see. I doubt he's going to be sneaky. People are good at DFS these days. And then Bobby Portis is someone that I have a little bit of interest in. Brooke Lopez, similar story, but their minutes and lack of consistency in this area just leaves a lot to be desired. And so not two guys I'm overly excited about right now, but they're on my radar. Beasley, similar situation. Wouldn't shock me if he gets involved a little bit more offensively, if Middleton and Pat Bev are struggling offensively. But just because of the soft matchup, I don't see them having to resort to Beasley too much today. Fingers crossed. But again, another high total game, and so I like the Bucks a lot tonight. Man, the Wizards. They don't make life easy for us. Kyle Kuzma's out. That's really the biggest piece of news. Rashawn Holmes is currently listed as questionable. Holmes is the current predicted starter for them tonight at center. Of course, if he gets ruled out, Marvin Bagley's already in a decent spot tonight. He's already projecting pretty well. If Holmes gets ruled out and Bagley starts, Bagley becomes one of the best plays on the slate, in my opinion. But with Kuzma already ruled out, that's already a boost for a few of these guys. We saw Patrick Baldwin start instead of Kuzma on Sunday, but but Baldwin Jr. is apparently listed and slated to be in the G League today, so he might not be an option for them. There's quite a few unique situations happening with the Wizards tonight on who might actually end up being in the starting lineup. So, long story short, the usual look at the starting lineup to figure out who to play for the Wizards tonight. Holmes is a very viable play if he plays tonight, but the main guy I'm looking to prioritize is the one that I'm always the most nervous to play. Is Jordan Poole. I have a like on him. I'm going to make sure I'm at least around field weight. Definitely comfortable being over the field on him. Denny Avdia, I would love to see Denny come in a little bit under-owned, which for me would be 15% or less. As of right now at 7,500, even with Kuzma out, I don't feel the need to force exposure to Avdia on a slate like this. But if he's low owned, my interest in Denny Avdia becomes potentially, I would be excited enough about him to make him a leverage play. But he's really just dependent around ownership. Kispert is showing up a little bit for me in my early runs. Bagley showing up in some of my early runs. Eugene is just one of those value plays I haven't taken too seriously yet. Maybe if Rashawn Holmes gets ruled out, I could see him making a bit more sense, but not something that I'm taking too seriously this early. The Thunder guys, we just keep getting these Q tags. It's that time of the year. It keeps the conversations interesting, I guess, but would love to have some easier decision making here. What's up, fam? Hope you're doing all right, Rodney. Thomas, hope you're doing all right. Rodney said Giannis and Jokic are on top of this slate for sure. They're in great spots. The issue with Giannis, and we didn't even talk about it too much, is just the blowout concern. It's really big for both of these teams, for the Spurs and the Wizards. Wizards are missing Kuzma, increases the likelihood of a blowout. Spurs are missing a few guys, and so definitely a high risk of a blowout there too. So they're both fantastic plays tonight, but they both also have a little bit more blowout risk than they typically would in these already great matchups. All right. So for the Thunder tonight, SGA is questionable. Jalen Williams is already ruled out. SGA was not at shoot around tonight. So it's looking like we might have another Thunder slate, which, it's fine. It's fine. Not my favorite team to take value plays from, but it makes sense. So at this point, it's relatively safe to assume SGA is probably going to miss this game. That makes Josh Giddey at 6,600 back on the menu for viable DFS plays. Lou Dort becomes a little bit more interesting at 4,300, but still not a must play. Wallace, how did that Wallace play go last time around? I'm blanking on it. I feel like he probably disappointed us, but let's see. Wallace at 3,900. Oh, no, he wasn't bad. He wasn't bad against Phoenix. We got that right. Sweet. Let's see. Matchup against the Sixers, though. Is he more expensive than he was? Nope, that's Chet. No, he's a little bit cheaper too. Yeah, I am totally fine going back right back to Case and Wallace in this spot. Isaiah Joe would obviously be viable as well. They're really the main two guys I'll be looking at. Chet with just Jalen Williams out is going to be a priority for me on this slate. Matchup against the Sixers has started to improve a little bit. Mo Bamba has done and improved a lot just over the last few weeks, but still, he's not going to be able to handle Chet tonight. And at 7K, I love the matchup for Chet. So assuming SGA is out, Chet and Josh Giddey are going to be my focal points. I'm going to make sure I have some exposure to Case and Wallace. Guys like Isaiah Joe and some of the other guys who benefit should boost themselves naturally in the optimizer. If not, we'll do it on the pre-lock show. All right. And then for the Sixers tonight, I don't have a lot of interest here. I am pumped to see that Joel Embiid is about to come back just in time for the playoffs. I'm not going to be afraid to play Joel Embiid, just so you all know that. I've done this plenty of times before. he comes back, I'm playing him. But in the short term, Tyrese Maxey is questionable. Clearly, that will dramatically change how we view the Sixers tonight if he ends up not playing. But assuming he does, I'm really just going to trust the optimizer on the Sixers tonight. If it looks like right now we have Harris, Kelly O, Kyle Lowry, Paul Reed, all showing up a good bit naturally, and they're projecting decently well. But personally, I'm not planning on forcing in any of these Sixers unless Tyrese Maxey gets ruled out. If he does miss this game, we really have to consider Kelly O. Kyle Lowry becomes much more viable. Tobias Harris would become close to a must play on this slate, but those are all just things we'll have to look at once we get the Maxey news. For now, I'm just going to assume he's going to play. We have late swaps, so we don't have to really overthink those situations too much. All right. Next up for let's see. Shooter said also MPJ said they're more worried about staying healthy, so maybe not too much playing time. Agreed. The Nuggets are just always going to concern me, especially in really soft matchups when it comes to blowouts. With them just not playing too much this time of season, not too much for them to play for. But if Jamal Murray gets ruled out, I do think this game can stay a bit more competitive. The Spurs have been keeping games pretty close, so I'm not going to completely fade them because I let other people do the overthinking. If the spot makes sense and they're relatively low owned, that's just icing on the cake. Thomas said, are you on AD tonight? Of course. If he plays. He's questionable, and so is LeBron. Because the matchup is so soft, my plan as of right now is to force exposure to both of them if they both play, but it's just kind of a wait and see scenario. Yeah, I haven't really ranked them yet, Shooter, to be honest with you, just because AD's questionable. So, if he doesn't play, then we don't have really too many options to look at. But for sure, AD over Jokic and over, I would say over Giannis too, if he plays, but hard to know for sure. Mr. Five, good morning, man. Hope you're doing all right. All right, let's get back on track, jump into these games. They get a bit less interesting from here on out. For the Knicks tonight, I know it looks like we might be missing some players here. We'll update that. But for the Knicks, we don't have a lot of injury news that's keeping things interesting. They are going up against the Miami Heat tonight. Mitchell Robinson is questionable. That doesn't really move the needle for me too much. Honestly, just none of the Knicks are standing out for me, which is a bit unfortunate. I was looking at taking a shot maybe on a Hart or Brunson here, but ultimately just a low game total, close spread, which keeps things interesting. We know you can shoot threes against the Heat, but still, just not a team I'm overly excited to pick on today with the Knicks. For the Miami Heat side of things, they're also looking pretty healthy these days. Matchup against the Knicks isn't one I like to pick on. You can make a case for Jimmy Butler. He does tend to play better in just more competitive game environments. So Jimmy Butler's probably the only player I'm really looking at in this game, but I don't love it. For the Rockets, we have Şengün listed as out, but once again, no real injury news here. Let me see what is going on here. We're missing everybody at this point. Well, I'm sure they're probably just updating the projections or something, but we can still at least see their names. For the Rockets tonight, we've been playing these guys for a while. I don't really play NBA DFS on the weekend too much, and so I did miss Jalen Green's comeback down to earth moment. But ultimately, for me, tough matchup going up against the Timberwolves. None of these guys stood out for me too much. Of course, there's still a little bit of upside. It's possible for them to get hot. You can look at Jalen Green. You can look at Fred VanVleet at 8,100, a little bit cheaper, slightly easier for him to get there. I would prefer Fred VanVleet over Jalen Green at this point, but ultimately, just not a team I'm planning on getting too much exposure to. Now, for the Timberwolves tonight, a little bit of a different story, but my biggest problem here is just price tags. Anthony Edwards being 9,400 makes you really have to think about playing him now. The matchup against the Rockets, we talked a lot about, much softer with Şengün out, and their pace of play hasn't increased, and they've just become a bit more of an offensive team, and it's been going well for them. But still not enough for me to really get excited about Anthony Edwards in this spot. There are a lot of pay up options on this slate who are in fantastic matchups, and Anthony Edwards is a great player, but just not in a great matchup. Rudy Gobert is a little bit more interesting at 7,600. You can talk me into him more just because with Şengün out, the matchup is just in general softer going up against the Rockets, but nothing really stood out for me when it came to the Timberwolves tonight. It looks like Mike Conley's projecting decently well at 5,500. Let's see, am I missing anything on him? Yeah, Simotto does like Mike a good bit. Strongly prefers Marvin Bagley. I already talked about Bagley. I am really only getting excited to play him if their starter center ends up missing this game, but I understand why it likes him that much. I'll keep a like on Conley just to make sure I keep exposure to him, but I am gonna go too crazy on that situation. For the Cavs going up against the Jazz, I love picking on the Cavs. And I know Donovan Mitchell has been a little disappointing here lately, but again, you can beat the Jazz everywhere. He's 9K. He's still been playing 30 plus minutes. Hasn't looked quite the same yet, but if you want a bounce back spot, the Jazz are one of the best bounce back spots you can find. So I do expect Donovan Mitchell to be pretty low owned on this slate. Of course, we have to verify that. But he's someone I'm looking at as a potential leverage play just because of the upside he brings in a soft matchup. So I like Mitchell a good bit today. Evan Mobley is starting to look a little cheap to me at 6,900. I have been waiting to get back on the train. I do like his upside here. If we're looking at the util spot, I do still prefer Jordan Poole over someone like Evan Mobley, but I don't even think the ownership's going to be even comparable. And so Evan Mobley, someone that I'm looking at as just a potential leverage play on this slate. He's shown a little bit of upside, especially in some of those soft matchups against the Sixers. He gets another one here tonight, and he's just a little bit cheaper than my guy, Jared Allen. So, Evan Mobley, we'll see where ownership falls. He might be a leverage play for me today, but I like the Cavs more than I think most people do tonight. Jazz are not appealing to me at all, besides maybe Walker Kessler. And Kessler's minutes have been a little hit or miss. Matchup against the Cavs, not my favorite. But that $4,700 price tag on someone who has his kind of upside just keeps him in play. And I understand why he's probably going to be as chalky as he is. The Cavs also have been starting to struggle a little bit against bigs here recently. So they haven't been the same shutdown defense that they were at times this season. We will need Kessler to see at least 28 or more minutes for me to really feel good about this, which again, his minutes have been a little bit all over the place. So there's no guarantees there, but I like the spot. So I'm willing to take the shot on him here. And then for injury news, we do know Markkanen's still out, which is also another reason why I like Kessler with him being in the starting lineup. Clarkson's out. Collins is out, which makes some of the other Jazz players slightly more viable options on this slate. But still, at the end of the day, the only guy I'm excited about is Kessler. Bryce Sensabaugh is viable, but I still don't love the matchup for him. If he shows up a little bit for me naturally, I'm fine with it, but I'm not going to force that. The Spurs are a team I thought we could just look past, but they never make our life that easy. Keldon Johnson is already out. Devin Vassell is out for the season. Jeremy Sohan is out for the season. Sohan and Vassell are two players who've been playing a lot of minutes for the Spurs this season. And that's why we're going to start, and that's why we're going to have actual decent, good value from the Spurs tonight. And part of it is, for me, it starts with guys like Chetty Osman, Malachi Branham. They're cheap. They're going to see 25 to 30 plus minutes. And really, their role is pretty secure, even if this game does blow out. So the matchup against the Nuggets is tough, but just because of some of the pieces the Spurs are missing means that Chetty is someone I'm going to make sure shows up in lines. And then Brandon should happen a good bit naturally. And then Sandro Mamukashvili, I'm butchering that. I am completely aware of that. He is someone who should start to see a few more minutes in the rotation just with some of the guys the Spurs are missing, but I don't plan on forcing him in. I need to look at Sandro a little bit closer before I feel completely comfortable having more exposure to him. But for now, the DS likes him. I can get on board with that. And then Victor. Again, if no one's playing Victor tonight, I am totally fine forcing exposure to him once again. Not someone that I love just because the matchup is pretty tough going up against the Nuggets in general, but Nikola Jokic in particular. We've seen Victor have some strong performances earlier this season against Denver, but then in that second game, he did struggle a bit more. For me, it's just really going to depend on ownership. If it's low, more than happy to put a 5% min on him. If he's seeing 10% ownership or more, I'm not going to chase it. And then the Nuggets. We talked about these guys. The blowout concern is real here with the Nuggets. Jamal Murray is questionable. That's really going to be the thing that dictates what I do here the most. Nikola Jokic is someone that I'm going to force exposure to really no matter what, just because we've been playing bigs against the centers all year long. And they are just not a great defensive team in general, but specifically against bigs. My point for Jokic is I am planning on matching field exposure on him. If Jamal Murray gets ruled out, ideally I'll be over the field on him. Similar thought process on MPJ tonight and Aaron Gordon. Murray, if he plays, not really interested in them. If he gets ruled out, my interest level goes up. Reggie Jackson at 5,200, I think we'll have some better value on, even if Murray does get ruled out tonight. So yeah, guys, that's the slate in a nutshell. It's a pretty interesting one, but a lot of it just per usual, just a lot of Q tags, a lot of Q tags. Locking ABC, I do like Giannis a lot today. I'm not gonna lock him, but I do like him. Walker Kessler is very, very good for value, especially with him starting now at the Jazz with some of the injuries they have. He's definitely a very, very solid value play. But again, it's early. It's early. So I think Kessler's someone I'm definitely going to have exposure to, really, no matter what else the news does. But yeah, I'm playing him. Rodney, revenge game for Donovan Mitchell. You're right. There's a bit of narrative too. And, I wasn't even thinking about the narrative, but let's try to keep his ownership low. So we're not going to talk about him too much, but would love to have him as a leverage play. Yeah, Keontae George does play well in tough matchups. I hate the Jazz, to be honest. It wouldn't shock me if the guards do well, especially when Clarkson's out. Sexton and George have both had some strong performances, even in tough matchups. They just didn't stand out too much for me. I still doubt I'll force too much exposure there, but it's hard to go wrong with him these days. Who are your 3 Laker plays as of right now if the Lakers play? If the Lakers play, I'm only planning on probably playing 2 Lakers. If all of them are healthy, it would just be LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I wouldn't really look at anyone else. And I'm strongly prioritizing Anthony Davis there. If LeBron James, if his ownership is over 15% or so, I'll probably just focus on AD. Is Murray out? Is Reggie a lock? Or I think you mean like if Murray is out, is Reggie a lock? Not for me, no. Reggie Jackson has been looking good here lately with Jamal Murray out. But at 5,200, he just isn't someone I feel like is a lock or someone you have to play. He does have a really nice matchup, which helps make him a bit more viable. But when we just look at the guard plays today, We have who are we just talking about? We were looking at oh yeah, Reggie Jackson. When you look at like 5,200, we have Mike Conley, who's in a pretty good game environment at 5,500. Pat Bev, who's in a really good spot against a really bad team. Probably one of my favorite value guard plays on the slate. We have Branham, who's in a good spot. We didn't even talk about Jared Butler, but if he plays tonight, definitely worth having in the conversation. So quite a few guard options in general in this below 7K range. So Reggie wouldn't be a lock, but he would just kind of be worth a mention in that large group of guys that we are already maybe have too many relatively cheap guards on this slate. But we'll see. We'll figure it all out and lock down the actual game plan on the pre-lock show. Again, that will happen at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. That's for VIP members only. Link is in the description if you're interested in that. Promo code BOB if you want a 10% discount. If you don't, that's fine too. I'll see y'all tomorrow. If not, I'll see you later today at 5:30. Peace out, guys.